All right. I guess we can start moving into our club. So, hello, everyone. Welcome to our second meeting of Entrepreneurial Speakers Club. We're so excited to have you all here. We have a great turnout today. And an awesome speaker, Dan Burkhart, is the founder of Recurly, which is a company that manages subscription services. And we're going to move into a little intro from Dan shortly. But before we start that, I just want to let everyone know that this meeting will be recorded. Your faces will not be included on the YouTube video that we end up posting for the Nueva community. But if you have any issues with privacy, definitely feel free to turn your video off or to change your name. Additionally, we'll put a link into our YouTube in the chat. So if you guys want to access that or look through the archives, you can totally do that as well. But now I will turn the floor over to Dan. And thank you guys again for coming to our second meeting of Entrepreneurial Speakers Club.
Thank you, Rihanna. Hello, everyone. I'm Dan Burkhart. I am Calder's father, Calder Burkhart's father. I am the co-founder and CEO of Recurly, and Recurly is sort of a shorthand for recurring billing. So we are a subscription billing management platform, and we founded our company in 2009. So we're an 11-year-old company. We do subscription billing management, which is basically, if you think about the way that a lot of these services that you see here, these are customers of ours. So everything from Sling, Showtime, Starz, Twitch, a lot of media and entertainment companies, a lot of consumer goods. So BarkBox, in that instance, dog chew toys. There's a lot of consumer applications as well as SaaS, B2B applications that process a product app service media subscription by way of credit cards. And the business that we run basically helps our customers manage the entire life cycle of a subscription. Typically, when a subscription is offered, it's not just set it and forget it. You don't just sign up and pay your $9.99 a month and just leave it be. More often than not, there might be a free trial, there might be upgrades, downgrades, you might want to pause it for a while. There's basically a journey that happens. And we make it easy for our customers to manage that journey and then understand where their revenue is coming from and how their various sources of customers are behaving. So we provide really a set of functionality, a lot of automation, a lot of data and insights and analytics to help inform our customers so that they can make better decisions about where they are acquiring customers and how they can better grow their business. So I'm delighted to speak with you today because I'm a serial entrepreneur. And I'm sure I would have been a member of this club in high school. So a little role reversal, but I'm delighted to share the experience. Today, Recurly is a business that's about 255 employees. We have over 2,100 merchants, we call them, which are customers. And we are managing right now 25 million active subscriptions, which results in about a $6.5 billion annual run rate of transactions. So it grew from modest beginnings, and we had some good fortune along the way. In the advent, we thought we were going to be focusing on SaaS companies that were basically delivering software as a service in the form of a very frictionless, direct-to-customer, credit card-based web offering. And lo and behold, we ended up signing up a whole variety of different companies from different business categories. So we had to shift our focus, and it was nice to be able to expand that aperture more broadly across other categories and learn what their needs were so that we could continue to do what we call customer-driven development and sort of center in on that sweet spot of where our customers were asking us for features and development. And we kind of took it from there. We have offices in San Francisco. We were founded in San Francisco, and that's where our headquarters are. We actually have about 85 or 90 people in Boulder. And then we have a third office that is the most recent, youngest office in New Orleans, and that's a developer office. So we can go to the next slide, Rihanna. Let me speak for just a little bit about the broader meta trend and why subscription. So this is interesting in that in the bygone era, you might remember things like Photoshop were sold as an upfront payment. I remember Photoshop 15 years ago was about $1,400, and there was a lot of piracy. A lot of people would steal Photoshop and pirated copies because it was such a huge amount of money. So if you're running a small design studio and you've got, maybe 5 or 10 employees, all of a sudden, buying each of them a license at $1,400 was a pretty significant hurdle. And so I like to use the example of Adobe, because what happened is over time, companies figured out that if they could basically reduce that upfront payment and spread it out over the life cycle of the customer, it's called value-based pricing, where you basically meter out the cost of of the service, product, app, service, or utility, whatever it is you're selling, and you align it with the value that any customer is receiving. And it allows you to get rid of that big purchase decision, the sort of purchase trepidation, they call it, which is, you know, a big major purchase like buying a car. You have to put a lot of thought into it. So what has been happening is as the web has evolved and different services have been innovating, companies have figured out that if they can eliminate friction in that purchasing process, they can actually figure out ways to engage their customers over a much longer period of time. And that customer life cycle, it's called, a lifetime value of those payments over a series of time, can stack up to being far more valuable over a time series than they might be from a single purchase. So another way of saying that $1,400 that you might have paid to Adobe, call it 10 years ago, they have seen something like, I think it's in the neighborhood of 30 quarters now of consistent revenue growth that have been breakout revenue milestones for them. The company has exploded since they pioneered into subscriptions. You know, Netflix, of course, and all of these services that have really helped pioneer the sort of pay-as-you-go model. Cell phones, you know, I think a lot of our parents or my parents certainly in the early days, they didn't want to put their credit card on file for anything. And then over time with Netflix and the advent of cell phones, people got a little bit more comfortable. Okay, I can trust you to charge my credit card when the service has been delivered. So these are some stats here that basically show what is happening universally across a broad variety of different categories. You see it in consumer categories, but also business to business categories. And it's basically just a function of how do companies figure out how to engage their customers over a longer period of time and ultimately optimize revenues. The compounding of long-term subscriptions, those annuity payments, if you will, have always been valued by Wall Street. You think about insurance and you think about bonds, which are basically a series of payments. All of those annuity revenue streams have a present value, and that future value of those payments is something that you want to ensure the continuity of those payments and that there's no breakage. So that's part of what we do. It turns out that credit cards fail for a variety of reasons. And sometimes those reasons are false negative, meaning the credit card was a good standing credit card. It should have gone through, and the payment gateway might come back with a failure. So part of what we do is we ensure that continuity of billing. So every company out there, Netflix to your corner gym, might have your credit card on file, and they will experience a certain percentage of breakage. And so part of what our service does is ensure that continuity of the billing and improves that customer retention, because if that billing breaks, that customer might not come back and correct for it. And so we help ensure the continuity of billing, and ultimately it helps retain customers and make sure that companies, our customers, are collecting as much revenue as possible. We can go on to the next slide, Rihanna. So this is just a quick snapshot of our team. It takes a village, and I'll get to this. Each of these individuals come from a broad variety of different backgrounds, and that's an important part of building a company. Next slide. You can see this is part of the village. This is our San Francisco office. So this is about somewhat less than half of our company. This is, I think, 2 years ago, so it's even larger now, but this is on the roof of our office. Just wanted to give you a sense for the size and scale. Next slide. And here's the breakdown of our various offices. And so, you know, I've always had this sense that, you know, oftentimes when you set out to do your annual planning and you set your strategy for the year ahead, you think about how many people you want to hire, how much revenue you're going to generate. Often it spooks people, and they think, gosh, I don't know how we're going to accomplish that. I've always taken sort of a rule of thumb of how do we triple it from here. And that is kind of like, it's almost like mountain climbing, where when you start to sort of scaffold up and you climb up a tree or anything, mountain climbing, it might be a good analogy, where you keep going, you keep pursuing the next sort of peak ahead, and then you look down and you go, wow, I'm actually really high off the ground. And you look ahead and you then see the next peak and the next peak. So it's a series of problem solving, and, you know, it's a daily adventure, which is, again, part of the entrepreneurial experience, which is you're never quite done. You know, you might come up with a really wonderful whiz bang idea, but once you have that idea, then it's about how do you drop it into gear and get into execution mode? How do you make it a reality, and how do you grow it from there? And there's always going to be a series of challenges that you'll encounter. So part of what I'm going to talk about today is that mindset and how you prepare for the experience of launching your own company, And how do you prepare starting today for that eventuality, both in your academic experience as well as your professional paths that you choose to take, as well as athletics and things that you might explore as a young aspiring entrepreneur. Next slide, please. About a year into our company, we found that it was time. We really need to establish our values, and we did. It was sort of a long weekend of thought, and we put together our values, which I'm proud of, and I'll just touch on here very quickly, because the values have actually created quite a significant guidepost for the company. Being mindful is basically this notion, not like transcendental meditation, but being mindful and aware of our customers and where their pain points are. And also the first person sort of notion of mindful, which is be accountable to your team. If you say you're going to deliver something on Thursday, deliver it on Thursday. And if for whatever reason something comes up, be a good communicator and let them know, hey, something came up. It's not going to be Thursday. Here's why. But don't just surprise them, with a delayed project. Solving elegantly, the next one is one that I find that is actually perhaps one of the more difficult values to live up to, which is it's always easy to add features and easy to add complexity. What's hard is adding those features that are most important to your customers, because unwinding technical debt and complexity is actually extremely hard. So solving for any given problem in the most elegant way has been something that has been a little bit of a cornerstone for us, which is to focus on good user experience design, making sure that we're eliminating unnecessary friction and that things are polished along the way. That is sort of a hidden attribute of our company that I think has been sort of one of these inimitable differentiators that has allowed us to set ourselves apart from our competition. And it really is in our DNA. We really sort of push each other on this and making sure we get to the right answer, which it leads us to the next value. See, they kind of clip together, which is to debate passionately, but also compromise accordingly, meaning that we want to hire people and surround ourselves with people that have well-formed opinions, that want to express opinions and really want to advocate for what they think the right answer is. You get a bunch of people that are passionate about getting to the right answer around a table, and you open up a debate, and you can get into some let's just say an extreme amount of passion in these debates. But ultimately, if you just debate ad nauseum and you never land it, that's not healthy for a company either, which is why we have the compromise accordingly component. And it is basically to say that we get to a better right answer with a broad variety of experiences and inputs. But ultimately, at the end of the day, you have to land it as a team and say, okay, we've decided on this, we're going to go forward. And now it takes us to the next value, which is, but we are going to also iterate everything. You're never done. You look at a homepage, you look at a sign-up flow, there's always opportunity to improve it. But better yet, if you look at the data, oftentimes you can debate something and you can have a difference of opinion, but you might say, okay, let's just get something out there, let's observe the data, and let's figure out whether we've improved it from the last instance or whether we've hurt ourselves. And that's what sort of supports the notion of, we can always iterate on it, is what I hear in the company all the time, which is, you don't just set it and forget it. There's always an opportunity to come back with data and improve on things. Lastly, own the outcome and get stuff done. Is you can see the little asterisk there is how we talk about it. Okay, that's it. And I just wanted to touch on it. So let's go into the interview, Rihanna.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. Wow. So much growth in just a few years. Okay, now we're going to head over to the interview portion where Rihanna and I are going to go back and forth, asking questions more about your journey along the way and also what you've learned from it. So keep in mind, if you have any questions, please feel free to drop them in the chat and then we'll answer them. We have like 10 minutes at the end for a Q&A portion. And if you don't want to say it out loud to everyone, just private message Rihanna and I and we'll say it. Okay.
All right, with that, we'll move into the questions. So our first question is, how did you come up with the idea for Recurly?
Okay, this is a good one because it didn't start on day one. It started, frankly, observing a pain point in various companies that I had worked for. I worked at eBay for 5 years. And part of what I saw was that keeping track of lifetime value of customers was extremely important. That was my job there. My job was to acquire customers from AOL, MSN, Google, the affiliate program, et cetera. And so we had to look at the bidding activity and ultimately the revenue that came from these various sources of customers. So when I started to look at time series data and the importance of understanding where your most valuable customers are coming from versus your perhaps non-profitable customers. You have to pay money to grow a company and to acquire customers, whether through clicks or advertising or sponsorship, et cetera. Some of those sources of customers, in fact, most of them will be unprofitable, and then you'll have a small subset that are profitable. That pain point was the sort of seed corn, if you will, for Recurly. I left and went to a startup after eBay, and that same startup had this same challenge. So then I started to piece it together. I was there for 3 years, and I really started to see this happening across the board. And then I left that startup and said, I've got to pressure test an idea. And that's how I teamed up with my co-founder, and my co-founder was someone who came from the world of payments and really understood credit card failures. So we provided sort of an interesting complementary set of experiences to get it off the ground.
Great, great. Can you describe how you took what you were passionate about and turned it into a company?
Yeah, I think, first of all, I'm competitive. I was an athlete. I was a rower in college. I was a single sculler in high school. I competed nationally. So there's that sort of gene, you know. I never turned down a good race or any good competition. I think as I went through business school, I went to University of Pennsylvania, Wharton School of Business as an undergrad. So I was interested in business. I had a number of businesses growing up as a youngster. And I think it started early on. I had a paper out and I started keeping track of my hours and then realized, geez, I'm getting paid about $4 an hour. And this was not the way of the future, even though as a 12-year-old, it was a great way to make money. I found along the way, one of my customers on the paper route had a lovebird aviary built off the side of his house. He was an old fella that was looking to retire. And I kept showing interest in this lovebird aviary when I would come collect payments, his annual subscription, or his monthly subscription. Finally said, would you like these birds? I'm looking for a home for them. And we went and built an aviary. I conned my dad into building an aviary off the side of our house. And lo and behold, these lovebirds breed. And I didn't even think of it as being a business, but it turned out to be a business that was far more profitable and far less work than a paper route. So that sort of set the light bulb off. I felt like, you know, Bart Simpson that figured out the secret of life. And it was like, wow, there's so many ways to make money in this world. So there was a passion to be an entrepreneur early on. I think as I later went on to graduate school, I went to business school. And that's when the internet really started to happen in the late 90s. And there were acquisitions happening. A lot of them were based on eyeballs, you know, the old metric. But I was sort of nerding out on a lot of the metrics that were driving valuations. And I started to keep track. Every single time a big high-flying acquisition would happen, I would do the math. I'd figure out how many customers they had, what their growth rate was. And ultimately, I'd back into what they were paying for each customer. And this was just something I was doing as sort of a side interest. And then when I graduated from business school, I came to San Francisco and I interviewed and had let the COO of NBC Internet know that I had nerded out on this for years. And he took great interest in wanting to see all of this work and all these comparables. And that was the beginning of a journey where I worked for both publicly traded companies and startups. And a lot of these themes kept cascading forward into a greater sort of level of understanding and confidence in finally launching Recurly. I don't think I could have done it directly out of school.
So that was a great segue into our next question. Along with this idea of you working in startups, how did working in business development prepare you for starting a company?
Yeah, this is a great question because I mentioned I worked for NBC Internet. I did business development at the time in the first .com days, as we say, where NBC's culture was very sort of value capture. It was, you know, get all the last terms in a partnership deal negotiation and sort of wrestle them to the ground. And a lot of those partnerships blew up. They didn't last. So I think I learned a lot by way of business development to understand the difference between value capture negotiating and when you just want to get the best price versus value sharing in partnerships and other forms of business relationships. And value sharing is, you know, these are two different dimensions, and you learn to use each of the ends of the spectrum depending on what you're looking to accomplish. But for the most part, value sharing is just like, it's very similar to a personal relationship. There has to be give and take. It has to be good for both parties. And typically those are the kinds of relationships that last over time. So that helped me when I later was building a company, thinking about fundraising, thinking about everything from our own partnerships to building a team and, what's fair and how do you incentivize and motivate people? How do you keep your partners interested over a long period of time? There's always going to be setbacks. And so if a partnership is out of whack and it's sort of asymmetrical, when things get tough, they tend to blow up. But if they're nice and symmetrical, then you can sort of partner together and say, all right, we're facing some adversity or this is a challenge, but let's just work through it. It's in our best interest to do that. So I think that's perhaps one of the ways in which business development was really good for me.
Okay, great. Now more into like something that could help the students here. Did you participate in any outside of school activities that helped you find what you were interested in?
Yeah, I certainly did. I mentioned to the hosts here in preparation that whenever I look at resumes, part of building a company is about how do you attract and retain talent. Whenever I look at a resume, of course, you do the quick eyeball scan and you see where someone came from, where they went to school, and maybe where they have worked. But I always go down to the bottom of the resume, and I personally look for some indication that someone is passionate about something outside of their professional or academic path. And it can be anything. It can be long distance running, athletics. It can be, beekeeping, glass blowing, guitar, you name it. But if they're passionate about things outside of their sort of workspace, then that to me is a strong indication of intellectual curiosity and someone who is excitable, someone who's passionate about what they do. And that tends to carry over into the workplace. Typically, people that have strong interests outside of work are also people that pour themselves into finding the right answer and getting excited about projects or tasks or even overcoming challenges together as a team. So for me, it was a variety of things. I grew up in Southern California. I was always in the ocean. I loved sailing and surfing and diving. But it didn't stop at that. I got into building surfboards. And then when I was an undergrad on the East Coast, I actually won a business plan competition for creating a computer automated surfboard shaping machine that would eliminate this exposure to cancerous materials. So one thing leads to another. And I think it all starts with intellectual curiosity, wanting to understand how things work, how to piece things together. And then as you move on in life, you'll start to form pattern recognition. So I think whatever it is outside of your work and academic sphere that turns you on, pursue it. My dad used to tell me that if you follow your passions, you'll never have to work another day in your life because what you do on a daily basis is just going to be something that you take delight in. And I think that's really good advice.
Yeah, to that idea of following your passions, can you briefly touch upon some of the work that you did before starting Recurly?
Sure. So I mentioned business development. I did that as sort of a constant thread in a variety of different kinds of companies. I worked for NBC Internet, then I worked for two different startups in the early 2000s that didn't make it. And I think the point there is these were, high-flying, well-named startups with, some famous people involved and, interesting technologies that were exciting, but they were technologies that were looking for a pain point to solve. It was sort of the technology was ahead of the business need. And that I think was really interesting because that is part of what excited me about Recurly is that I later went to eBay and I had this boot camp, if you will, of call it time series economics, lifetime value of customers. And I was always reporting on these metrics and I was living and breathing this for a couple of years. But what excited me about Recurly was it was a simple enough business that I could describe it for my parents and they actually knew exactly what I was talking about, immediately. Whereas some of these prior companies, my dad was a nuclear engineer from MIT, and he used to look at me going, "I don't quite understand what you're talking about," and that was a problem. So this was simple enough that it was a well understood pain point, and it was a pain point that on day one our company was launched, and it was a small little beta announcement on TechCrunch, and on day one we had 40 paying customers, and I knew, okay. Companies typically spend a lot of time trying to find product market fit. And you might have to iterate to find that sweet spot where companies are willing to pay you or customers are willing to pay you for whatever it is you've created. We were fortunate in that we had that on day one. So the work prior to Recurly actually really helped inform how we approached it. But some of the failures were some of the best lessons for me along the way, because I knew that I didn't want to get over my skis in a business that might sound really interesting, but if you can't find customers that are willing to validate, hey, I would be willing to pay for that, and that is a real significant pain point for me, and boy, I'd pay someone to solve that problem. That's a strong indicator that there's something there.
Okay, great. How did your unique educational journey lead you to entrepreneurship?
Yeah, I wonder if it might actually be entrepreneurship led me to my educational journey. I chose business school because I really felt a strong desire to kind of equip myself with the needed tools and the disciplines of whether it's statistics, math, physics, marketing, et cetera. I really wanted to dive into the world of business pretty early on. I wouldn't say that that's something that I would offer as advice. You can always go to business school. I think having follow your passions is really the point. I went to business school twice, and I've gotten a good belly laugh, and not quite laughed out of the room, but a good belly laugh from investors that say, "Wait a minute, why did you go to business school twice? We don't understand." I studied different things as an undergrad than I did in graduate school. And I feel that that's also what set me up for the ability to start to triangulate on different disciplines and bring them together in a way that allowed me to have the confidence to ultimately launch my own company. The educational journey is really also about surrounding yourself with other people who have had different experiences in their profession and really learning from them and their experiences as well. And that really, I think, is one of the most important pieces about going to any business school or any school for that matter is the people, the relationships and the networks that you create.
So in our last question, I guess this was kind of segued by one of the previous questions on your past business experiences. But we'd love to hear about like some failures, some things that you would think of as negatives that ended up turning into positives in the long run.
Yeah, they are numerous, but I have a few that I still have a bit of scar tissue from. But boy, it was September 3rd, 2012. I was in this home actually. It was Labor Day, and we had a horrible failure in our infrastructure. We were a young company that had publicly traded companies now on our service, so a lot of responsibility, and we had a series of hardware failures that led to our inability to go access credit cards. And anyway, it was something that we had about 24 hours of a pretty solid outage, which happens to companies. But leading up to that, there were some moments with my co-founder and engineers where I asked about backup protocols and no single point of failure, et cetera. And I heard, "I think we should be okay." And to this day, that's what I wake up in the middle of the night sort of as a nightmare. And I've learned from that, which is our company was it was one of these near-death experiences where we almost lost it. And we had to communicate very directly and earnestly with our customers and give them frequent updates. But most importantly, I found that it was the character and integrity in the moment of hardship that really galvanized our company, and we earned a lot of trust from our most important customers at the time as we made our way through that set of challenges. And it not only helped us galvanize those relationships and retain those customers, but it really helped inform how we held ourselves accountable to testing and continually making sure that it's not I think we should be okay, but being darn certain that we are in fact okay. And this is part of maturing as a company where, in the early days, we were a little bit, let's just say happy-go-lucky as a young sort of wily startup. And then as we grew up, we realized we have a tremendous amount of responsibility. We've got 70 million credit cards on file in our vaults, and we have to be secure and we have to be resilient and make sure that we are a mission critical service that our customers can depend on. So that changed the way we thought about hiring. It changed the internal processes, and it changed how we communicate and how we test and iterate what we do to validate everything. So that was something that really was an awakening for us.
Thank you so much for that interview portion. That was super, I think, enlightening for probably every single student here and every single parent and teacher here. I'm going to stop sharing now because we're going to go into our little audience Q&A session. And yeah, we will look through the chat and get started. Isabel, do you want to take the first question?
Yeah, sure. And keep in mind if you have any questions you want to ask Dan, put them in the chat. So first question, what was the process of pressure testing like? How did that help you refine your idea into a company?
Of pressure testing, the idea?
Mhm.
So that great question. And any entrepreneur needs to pressure test an idea, which is to talk to people. Starts with, you can come up with the best whiz bang idea, but if you do it in a vacuum and you only talk about it with your friends and family, that might be the first step, but you've got to go out and talk to likely customers and get some validation there. I know that the iLab talks about design thinking and figuring out what problem you're solving for and understanding the personas. It's really important to go out and talk to people to really get a broad spectrum view of, okay, what is the sweet spot? What am I solving for? What do these people share in common? And how can I start to construct a persona and an audience that is repeatable? So it involved talking to a lot of people, a lot of investors, a lot of potential prospective companies. I went to a lot of startup organizational events in San Francisco. San Francisco is a great place to start a company for that reason. There's so many entrepreneurs, but there's also so many companies that are willing to talk to entrepreneurs about, hey, let me hear your idea and let me give you some feedback. So that I can't underscore enough how important that is.
We have another question. This one is there something along your process of creating Recurly that you would have done differently?
Oh gosh, that is such an interesting question because today I'm a very different leader and a different kind of manager than I was early on, and that is by necessity. In the early days, the founders really have to learn how to play every single role in the company. I was doing sales, I was doing support, I was doing demos, I was taking out the trash, everything. And today, I have people that are doing. I still take out the trash, but um, I know most of these roles. I know how to delegate and make sure that they have responsibility and authority to own these respective areas. So they have role clarity and they have task identity. They have something that they can pride themselves on when they meet and exceed their goals. But I'm holding other people accountable now. I think looking back in time, I've become a better manager and a better leader because I probably spent too much time as a founder having founderitis, which is my board would say, get the wrench out of your hand, Dan. You got to delegate and basically embrace the team. And that is something that founders have a tough time with. It's not, I don't think it's only me. I think a number of you may also, high aptitude people, Nueva students are going to have challenges delegating that authority and tasks to other people. But it's a mind shift of saying, okay, I need to get out of first gear, get into second, third gear, and start to take advantage of the power of a team. And when you break through on that epiphany of how powerful it is to enlist other people's great brains and their talents and to just give them clear missions and say, here are the targets and work the targets out with them, and then they go exceed it, that's when the machine really starts to grow. And so that, I think, is something that I wish I knew a little earlier on. It's sort of the power of pattern recognition and being decisive and learning how to loosen the grip and trust other people. It's definitely a team sport.
Okay, we have another question from the same person. With technology changing so much in the past few decades, what advancement in technology changed Recurly the most?
Ooh, the cloud. I remember when we first launched, we actually had, you might remember debates 10 years ago, 8 years ago, that, when the advent of the cloud was coming. It's when, in the old days, we used to buy databases and servers and all the equipment, and you would own this infrastructure. Today, you basically just rent it and you can scale it up. We use Google, others might use AWS. That sort of transition in technology has allowed for us to run much more secure environments. We deploy code continually, almost every day. It's done in a very automated way where you might have a whole series of servers. We used to have to manually deploy code to each server. Now it's completely automated and we can basically scale up when the Grammys, the Olympics, the World Series, Super Bowl, country music awards, any of these televised events where people are signing up for subscriptions or free trials, our servers will get hammered immediately 10 minutes prior to Taylor Swift going on for the Grammys. And it's a global thing. It's bigger than the Super Bowl. So for us in the old days, we used to have to spin up actual physical servers. And then now today we are in the cloud. It's a much more secure way an automated way for us to be resilient and elastic, as we say. And so that has also allowed us to put controls around environments where data and traffic of certain types can only go one way. So it creates more secure environments and containers. So there's a lot of advancements that have happened in just the last 5 years that have really tremendously changed the way you can think about building a company, in fact, because you don't have to buy all of this gear and licenses up front. You can basically start small, and you can use big, massive databases and get access to compute power as a small entrepreneurial startup.
With regards to that and like to the high demand, we have a question about what your competition looks like. Are there many other companies with the same purpose? And if so, what is your moat? How are you able to beat out that competition?
Yeah, there are. When we founded, part of our inspiration was my co-founder, Isaac, had launched a prior SaaS company on one of our competitors, and the other competitor was a big heavyweight. They're publicly traded. They solve for billing in the way that Salesforce solves for billing. Heavy manual invoicing, heavy complexity in terms of invoicing, and heavy on finance automation. We took a slightly different approach, which was, okay, let's focus on what we call lightweight, high velocity transactions, tend to be credit card based. Rather than manual invoicing based, which is why we've been able to attract much more of the sort of consumer facing companies like Twitch and CBS. We have 15 CBS properties, Showtime, Stars, et cetera, rather than heavy B2B, heavy sort of manual invoice, net 30 terms, which is what happens when you build companies with higher transaction amounts. So the market is stratified where different competitors kind of occupy different areas of the market. We really strongly occupy the what we call high velocity direct to customer. It can be B2B, but it tends to be more B2C, credit card based products, apps, services, media. So if it's credit card based, we have a really strong set of capabilities. We use machine learning to help us with the credit card retry logic and ensuring that continuity. And that's where we've really burrowed in. So there are a lot of companies that do it. If you go look up recurring or subscription billing, you'll find maybe a dozen of them. But we just really continue to double down on our strengths, and we really have a strong stable of customers to show for it, which starts to make it easier for us to sort of snowplow against our customers that might not have the same customer stable.
Okay. Now looking more on the internal side of things, Luca has a great question about how do you manage such a large company with 200 plus employees? What are some of the differences in scaling compared to when you were a smaller company?
Yes, the first part, how do we manage, make sure I understand the question, manage a company with this many employees or is this many customers? Okay. That team, that's why I put the executive team there. Our CTO came from PayPal. He's our second CTO we've had. So at different points in time, there are these, what I call gear shift moments when a company's going through these various inflection points of growing and scaling. And you might find that it's time to go get someone that has a deeper set of experience, that has more management experience, has managed larger teams. Our current CTO coming out of PayPal has 85 or 90 engineers in his organization. And this is easy for him because he managed massive parts of He ran Venmo, which I think most of you are aware of, as well as a number of marketplaces for PayPal. So he had run large organizations and has been in payments for a long period of time. So I guess the point is making sure that you surround yourself with people that have deep experience that helps you ladder up, and hiring people that have experience of growth and responsibility that is far greater than the stage you're currently in is really a critical piece of figuring out how your organization can grow. If you continue with the same people as the founding team, they may not have management experience. They might be incredible coders and might be great, but they don't have a lick of management experience. At a certain point in time, that starts to matter. My co-founder is not someone who manages. He is a technology fellow. His ideal day is to come in and put his headphones on, get in his terminal, and start applying his computer science knowledge and attacking the most difficult challenges to scaling and security and all of these things that are really still really very critical to us. But he doesn't find any delight in managing others and communicating with teams. He likes to just get in and burrow in and solve problems.
and that's fine. So people find different roles and paths in the company, and I think it's the role of a CEO to figure out who is best suited for a certain set of responsibilities at a given point in time, and to identify when they are tapping out and reaching an upper bound limit.
So I'm seeing we have 1 minute left, so I think we'll go into one last question really briefly, which is from Calder. I think it's very salient for high schoolers, and it's around the intern experience at Recurly. So do you have any advice for like Nueva interns? And after this question, we will close.
Yeah, we've had fantastic interns from Nueva. Some of you might recall AJ Nadell, who's at Stanford now, really won over the hearts and minds. So he came in, and I remember meeting with executives from American Express, and I pulled AJ into the meeting. I said, "Hey, follow me." And he's like, "Really? I'm in a t-shirt. These guys are in suits." I said, "Come on with me." And I brought him into the meeting, and I introduced AJ, and I said, AJ deployed code into our production environment within his first 30 days at Recurly, and they were so blown away. So yes, we do have internships. It is a little bit more challenging in the sort of work from home mode. And so right now I can say we don't have interns because we're all sheltered in place. Hopefully, as things open up in the early part of next year, we'll be back on that program and make sure that we make it available to awesome Nueva students that are interested in gaining entrepreneurial experience in any number of ways. You can learn a great deal just by way of observation, but we find also that interns have the ability to contribute as well, and that's a really wonderful experience.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, and thank you everyone who asked questions and listened the whole time. We really appreciate it, and hope to see you next month. Remember, it's the third Tuesday of every month, and thank you so much, Dan, for all of your advice. I think it really helped everyone here.
Thank you so
My
much, Dan.
pleasure.
Let's get a big round of applause, maybe a virtual round of applause.
Awesome.
Thank you, Dan. I know we so appreciated this.
Thank you so much. My pleasure. Best of luck.